to the season 2 finale. I know, right? I've produced and hosted 20 of these episodes already, and my mind has yet to be cracked from this, but that's a different story. But anyway, I'm your friendly neighborhood host, Bryan M. talking to you live-ish from Brooklyn. Joining me today is a wonderful friend of mine. She is a stage manager, I want to say internationally, because one, she's been doing a lot of great stuff in New York, but also she's done a lot of great stuff overseas. Mariko.
Hello.
That's your cue.
Okay.
Like if I do that, it's like.
Hi, Bryan.
Hi, Mariko. So yeah, as I said, she is a stage manager for I want to say 5 years now, or maybe even more.
I think I've started in 2014, so this is my 6th year.
Oh wow, six years being a stage manager.
Yeah.
And I know stage managing is like almost like one of the most unsung heroes of being in theater outside of, especially in backstage, because you not only have to deal with, actors trying to, talk backstage, it's like, you really stand up, that sort of thing, but also just making sure the show runs accordingly, making sure sound cues are good, light cues are good, that sort of thing. So tell me, how did you actually get into becoming a stage manager? Was this something like you sign up to do like an assistant stage manager, ASM thing, where it's just like, hey, I need a assistant stage manager. Could you help me with this? But yeah, how did you get into? Not only how did you get into stage managing, but like, what was your previous performing arts experience like? Was like, were you kind of like already into theater?
So that's a really good question. So when I was in Japan, I was completely different industry working for fashion. So, but at the same time, I've played the trumpet since when I was 9. So I kind of familiar with this performing arts industry, but I haven't been on stage as an actor. But when I was in fashion industry in Japan, I wanted to do something more fun for myself. Of course, I liked fashion, but at the same time, I kind of missed being on stage or doing something for performance in front of the people. So I came to America and then went to college. But at the time, I didn't know actually what stage manager is. But I majored in theater, and then my first college production, I wasn't sure what I can do. And then the professor told me if I'm interested in the theater, I could be assistant stage manager for the production. Then I learned stage manager. And then I think I could feel like, I think this is for my job for the future. Then I just started.
Could you actually give us like I wouldn't say like day by day, but like a quick like rundown, like what the stage manager does? I want to say pre-show, during the show, and then post-show. Because I've seen what ASM does, because especially, I've had 2 great ASMs like work with me backstage, and both of them would be so good in their jobs, especially since you're dealing with a college production, and college production has a lot of people in the
Right.
and that's not just including the like off-Broadway productions, that sort of thing, or Broadway productions. They probably have like off-Broadway productions probably like as I want to say probably has similar to a college production where it has the same amount of cast with crew, but a Broadway production has probably like hundreds of people behind the scenes, like that sort of thing. But from a what does a stage manager do pre-show all the way to essentially post-show? Because I've seen like bits and pieces of it, but from your experience, like what do you do?
So as a pre-show, so for example, during the rehearsal, mostly it doesn't matter. It's stage manager, production stage manager, or assistant stage manager. We usually divide our job for each person. So
Yeah.
basically taking blocking notes and then taking care of rehearsal props and then maintain a rehearsal schedule, also communicating with directors, each designers, and sometimes producers. And at the same time, we have to communicate with actors very carefully and very
Yeah.
friendly. And then, so that that's our posture thing. And there's
Yeah.
at the same time we are working for like a paperwork a lot, making a lot of the rehearsals reports, and also breakdowns and the prop list. That kind of things happen every day, and every day it changed a lot. So we have to
Yeah.
make sure a lot of documents. So mostly that kind of things happen pre-show. And then right before we start the performance day, of course, there's a technical rehearsal and then getting into the theater and prepare backstage to keep actors and all backstage crew safe. So we tape down the backstage and then make sure the prop table is fine and costumes and the wardrobe clothes. So right before we moving into the theater, of stage manager takes care of all backstage safety and also organize. But at the same time, if you are a production stage manager or stage manager, we have that person have to make sure all cues with each designer's lighting, sound cues, and sometimes projections. So that kind of things happen right before we're going to start the performance. It's mostly the technical rehearsal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
So yeah,
mhm.
I know for the most part that especially with my stage backstage stuff, especially at Brooklyn College, uh, where things change on a whim, especially if it's like right before the day or right on a tech day, especially on tech day where it's like things aren't working as the things go. I imagine there's a lot of paperwork to do, especially during tech week. In your experience, uh, has Tech Week been a fun week, or has Tech Week has Tech Day? I mean, Tech Day. Well, Tech Day to certain things, but especially if it's like a production that doesn't have like amount of like space to do where we spend a week. But anyway, that's a different story. Has Tech Week been a fun like? Oh, this isn't like that hard to do, but or is Tech Week essentially? Hey, I really wish this week to be over because I know for the actors, it's like the actors will be like very strenuous, like I hope this week to be over, that sort of thing. But for production people, it's like almost like second nature to them. Has it been second nature to you, where it's just like, hey, it's just another week for me. Okay, make sure this prop is over here, that sort of thing. Or do you feel that, or do you understand and feel the tech week like they're like just wearing down on you?
I really like Tech Week and the technical
Oh, really?
rehearsal. Yes,
Really?
of course. Yes, I feel like that's the only thing, like, oh, that's the only time for stage manager, actually. Like,
To really shine?
during, yes.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, during the rehearsal, of course, that time is mostly for actors or performers and the directors. And then during the performance, of course, that is only for the actors and the performance. So there's not much time to like focus on only first, hey, this is only your time, hey, stage manager. So that technique is actually the only week or only day or only time for stage manager. So I really like that week. I mean, of course, it's really busy and hard, intense most of the time. But at the same time, I could see, I could watch what's gonna happen on stage for the first time. So that's really excited for me. So
Yeah.
But at the same, it's like we have to work like a very long day, like 10 to 10. So it's
Yeah.
kind of hard,
Yeah.
honestly.
It's, especially like, especially you're just being on the acting side. Yes, 10 to 10, where it's just like, you gotta be there like 2 hours before just to make sure you're there. So you're kind of like in there at 8 o'clock in the morning. I know people who have been doing production stuff. They're like, it's 8 o'clock in the morning, so it's like all this whole day is just gonna be like rolling around really fast. But then the director will probably do like the whole stop and go thing, where it's like, okay, act a little bit, and it's like stop, well, gotta do something with the lights, that sort of thing. From your experience, like, what is the most difficult part of tech week? Is it essentially where it's just like, oh, it, is it essentially, where stop and go, where it's like, oh, we got to make sure everything, stop right here, you know, do a little thing with the lighting, that sort of thing, especially since, the play could be like 90 minutes, and then, just doing all this could be like take up to like 4 hours just to get everything, everything just like so like tuned. And then later it was like, okay, we'll do the thing, and it's like everything's doing well, and then stop, figure it out with the lights. So yeah, I think it's called stop and go. It might be another different name, but is that like the thing, like the most, I don't want to say boring thing as a stage manager to do, because you're kind of like just waiting for everybody to get their cues done, but especially because as a stage manager, just waiting for people to get their cues, and it's like, yeah, okay, I already know this cue, that sort of thing. Is that like the most, like in your experience, is the stop and go thing, like what is your experience with the stop and go format, where it's just like, hey, gotta stop the thing for a couple of seconds, figure out the lights, make sure this problem's over here, that's it.
Um, Actually, so right, as you say, when we do tech rehearsal, usually like a stop and tell. So stop and go, stop and go. But
Yeah,
at the same time, so usually there's a lot of waiting time, not only for stage manager, but also for the actors, because lighting clues or scenic clues or like a lot of technical clue has to change their cues to
yeah,
adjust. So during the waiting time, actually, it's good time to practice by myself how to call the cue, how to timing for the cue,
oh,
so and also organizing my script. Some stage manager take cue notes on their like iPad or laptop recently, but I'm
yeah,
still I'm still working on the paper script, so which is my preference. So
yeah,
I'm organizing my queuing script during the waiting time, and if I have questions to directors for the next queue, I always make sure with her or him together. So actually, there's not like a boring time for me, and sometimes it's good to have like a little waiting time as a break time. So there, because I have to focus entire day or week to make sure each cues. So
yeah.
that's why it's good to have like a just small break during the waiting time.
Yes.
Yeah.
So basically, these breaks are essentially like almost like a study time, where it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, like Q97. I hope it's like, like Q97, and then when it first in like Q97, it's like, okay, that sort of thing. So it's like, okay, when this thing comes up, it's like Q97, that sort of thing. So it's like, or it's not because I've you know in terms of the production where I had to call, and being like, I've only done like sound, like audio booth thing like once, and that was at the MTC. That was a fun thing too, uh, especially since I had to do it like at least twice or maybe even 3 times. I forgot how many times, but hearing the stage manager over the set like this, and it's like, okay, I would hear the light cues, all that stuff, and I would just see light cues, and they're like, okay, sound, get that cue or something like that. So when you're actually calling the show, compared to when you're calling rehearsal or maybe even tech week, how does that feel in terms of just a sense like when you're calling a show during an actual show time when it's actually people in the audience, that sort of thing,
Mhm.
the show's actually running fully and whatnot. Like how does is this essentially like doing the same thing with rehearsal or tech week, or is this like another feeling altogether?
Um, Actually, it depends. For example, if I work for a small theater, technical rehearsal happens right before the performance. So, for
Yeah,
example, so that if there is only technical rehearsal happens right before the performance, then it goes to the performance at that night. It makes me very nervous
yeah,
because there is no time to practice. But if I work for a little bit bigger show, there's usually like a technical rehearsal time and the dress rehearsal, and then goes to the performance. So that process makes me very feeling confidence and very comfortable. Makes me comfortable to call the cues. So I prefer. I mean, I can do both, but I mean I have to do both. But usually if I call for like a dress rehearsal and a take rehearsal rather than performance, it's I feel like still I could make mistake. I
yeah.
mean I shouldn't, but I could if I probably if I made a mistake, but still each clues can cover, oh this is not right, or they can tell me, oh this is not right for me or not for actors, so they can still adjust. But during the performance I always get nervous, so
Yeah.
to covering the cues. So
Now,
yeah, but I have to. I That's why I always practice at home or during the performance, right before performance.
that's pretty cool. Uh, Especially when it's like a big stage show. I mean, I do want to say if it's like a small intimate show where it's just like barely any cues to go over, that sort of thing. Light cues might be like in the hundreds, but like sound cues might be in the 20s, but just regular cues, that sort of thing. If it's like a small intimate show, like inside of a black box, that's probably like less strenuous or just like stressful. But when it's like in a more big stage, main stage thing, that's like much more of the time to actually just like before, like what you said before with tech week. It's like a good time to essentially just study crunch time. It's like okay,
Mm-hmm.
blah, that's yeah. Now you mentioned that you've been a stage manager for 6 years. I feel like I known you as a stage manager for BMCC for like much more than that. Even though it's like when I was there, it was like I feel like you were stage manager for like a lot longer than I. It's like you already know like how to do all that stuff. How did you actually end up becoming the stage manager at least for BMCC? Was it like because I know because you mentioned like professor and it's like oh I need an ASM that sort of thing. Like how did you like go from ASM to essentially stage manager? Because I feel like whenever there is a production at BMCC, it's like Mariko is actually doing the stage managing thing, and like being the queue, I'm like oh she is, and then like oh she's okay. It's like that's like it's like whenever I see that production having you on the stage manager, I feel like that's a good look. So, like, how long is like, how did you actually, uh, how long have you been stage managing for BMCC Productions?
I think I've done one, two. When I was when I was in BMCC as a student, I think I've done just two productions. I think.
Yeah.
But after I graduated, I'm working for BMCC as a stage manager 1 year. So I've done two other productions in the BMCC as a graduate student.
Oh, nice.
So yeah,
So that's like 4 productions, like 2 as a regular student, but 2 as a graduate student.
yes.
Uh, in terms of your experience as both an undergrad, it was like as an undergrad compared to as a graduate student, were there any differences in terms of being a stage manager, or was everything essentially the same, even as an undergrad and as a graduate?
As a student, I think I because I was a student, I'm still
Yeah,
a process of learning how to do as a stage manager. Or even I wasn't in theater industry when I was in Japan. So learning theater is actually that was my first experience of college. So I wasn't still sure what is right or what is wrong or what is good for actors or as a stage manager. So I think during college year, I was still learning how to do or how to deal with a lot of things. But
yeah,
after I graduated, I think that I felt, of course, I was still learning, but at the same time, I felt like I have to teach something to students too, or I have to not teach, but probably I have to help to learn something to make their experience as a like a stage production in college. So that is the difference between like a student stage manager and a graduate stage manager, I think.
now, I mentioned before that you're kind of like almost internet. You've done shows internationally, but I know you've done shows. I want to say in Germany, or even
Yes.
okay. Uh, so how is it actually stage managing internationally, where it's like, okay, it's not in New York City, it's not in a more familiar area. It's like, okay, I'm doing a show in Germany now. It's like, German theater might be actually uh, a lot more. I want to say artistic, or maybe like that sort of thing. It's like, how was actually, yeah, how is essentially stage managing internationally, where you could go, okay, I'm going to do a show in Germany, and then the next show I'm going to be doing is in Japan, that sort of thing.
I think so as a stage management perspective, each country has different system of state, like a theatrical technical system. For
Yeah,
example, in America, usually stage manager call all cues for lighting or sound or
yeah,
productions or set changing, something like that. But if you go to Europe, in Europe, actually, each country has different system. But last year, when I went to Germany in Berlin to working for opera summer festival, um, I, one of the director who is German, he told me that in Germany, there is not actually like a stage manager position. Usually, especially for opera, I think if that was theater or performing arts, probably it was different. But I worked for opera, so that was a little bit different from performing arts like a musical or plays.
yeah.
So for the opera in Berlin, there was not like a stage manager actually. So it's a little bit different from American system. So what I did is what I did was actually like a stage managing in America, but I did with assistant director. Like there were,
Oh, okay.
yes, there were 3 to 4 assistant directors for each productions. So, but at the same time, there was only one stage manager, only me. So, but I could have done anything by myself if I needed to do everything that I'm doing in America. So I've
Amazing.
done, yeah, so I did with 4 or 3 assistant directors. So that helped me a lot. And then usually assistant director takes care of each blocking notes. So stage manager doesn't need to take each blocking notes on a not like a score. So that was very interesting experience. And then
Yeah,
usually assistant director takes care of entrance or exit. So sometimes props also they also takes care of props and then the design.
yeah.
So
That
stage
must.
manager actually doesn't need to do anything until right before the performance. So what I did is right before maybe 1 week or 2 weeks before, I joined to the rehearsal and I watched the rehearsal and the performance and then I got entrance and exit and set changes or costume changes, all like details of a performance from assistant director, not from the rehearsal process. And then I took note everything on my script, then started to, dealing with lighting designer or other designers. So that was a little bit different process from like American theater.
Yeah, this like just doing the European theater thing must have been one hell of a learning curve. Just so it's like, hey, I'm kind of used to having other people, it's like other people call these things, but you're essentially like the only one that does this, but everyone else pretty much does everything. So you're just kind of like, okay, it's like, hey, this is what I need to do. Okay. And so yeah, it also sounds like fun because also opera is like another performing arts that I feel like it is sort of like theater because it is telling a story, but the story is in the notes and it's how it's sung. So it might be in another language or not that sort of thing, but it's always getting its point across by its singing, that sort of thing. So yeah, I so were you only doing that just for like that one time, or were you able to do that like more than once, especially with opera?
Actually, I'm looking for some jobs in Germany right now because in
Oh,
America there's no
yeah,
there's no opportunity to working for that.
I
So
know, sadly.
I'm looking for yeah. But at the same time, as I mentioned, that it's completely different system. But at the same time, in America, opera and the stage opera and then like a theater and a musical, there are also difference between like a stage managing job. So usually for if you're working for theaters or musicals, entrance and exit are responsibility for actors by themselves.
Yeah.
But if you're working for operas, stage manager needs to give them cue to enter the stage.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yes. So
Which, which I always feel like is something the ASM would do backstage, especially in terms of like a big production, and then he was like, oh, he's like, right, that's your cue. I'm like, okay. And then because it's odd because sometimes I would see people take their time to actually walk out on stage, that sort of thing, especially if it's like a scene transition, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
And I know scene transitions are always much more hectic to do because it's like, especially working backstage, where it's just like, oh, uh, we gotta get everything so quickly, and switch into the next scene. And luckily, the curtain is, luckily the curtain is like dropped down, so no one sees us like rushing around, doing all this stuff behind, just to make sure everything is on cue wise. But yeah, transition wise, I feel like the entrance and exit things, especially for opera, it's like, yeah, I kind of feel like a stage manager would be like, just make sure that guy goes on stage, that sort of thing.
Yes. But
I know
if you
I feel like I lost my train of thought, but that's just how I struggle. But
yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So, but even though if I work for opera in America, I have to give the cue for the opera singers. But in Germany, stage manager doesn't need to do so give the cue for entrance for singers. So it's complicated. If I work for it like a different countries, I have to learn different stage management skills or like a not only skills but also like a system.
Yeah,
So it's kind of hard to I really like to work internationally, but at the same time
yeah.
it's very hard to learn what's
The
the
international,
basic like system
like
of each
handbook.
countries. Yeah, so
Like if there was
about
a handbook,
German.
it's like if there was a handbook, it's like, yeah, okay, it's like, German, okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes.
Now, have you actually done shows in Japan for stage managing, or
Not yet.
oh,
That's
okay,
my next dream.
Oh,
It's
okay.
weird thing. Even though, yeah, because I've started the learning theater in America, I only have done theater here or in Germany too. So I haven't done anything in Japan yet. And of course, in Japan, they have a different stage management system. So I have to learn, and also we use the different languages. So I have to dealing with that too. So, but if I could work something in Japan, that would be really nice for me too. Yeah, that's my dream.
Uh, have you actually seen? Well, I know I'm pretty sure you've actually seen theater in Japan, but from your experience as I'll just say casual theater fan, it's like, what is the theater in Japan like? Because I know there is uh, like different styles of theater. Because I'm trying to remember all the styles, especially since theater history would say like kabuki, that sort of thing. That it's like I know there's like different styles, but in your experience, like what is theater in Japan like?
That's a good question. Um, I honestly I don't have a lot of knowledge of Japanese theater industry, but what I know is, for example, in America there's a Broadway, like a
Yeah,
big show. In Japan, same. There are few companies running big show like a Broadway theater, like musicals and the plays. But at the same time, there are very small theaters like off-Broadway or off-Broadway theater in
yeah,
Japan too. So especially those small theater in Japan, they are they're working with very low budget. So
yeah,
usually there's not like a donating system like in America. So they usually pay by themselves to run the like a open the show, or they sell tickets by themselves. That was very surprising idea for me because I didn't know. So that kind of things happen in Japan. So if they want to work in the theater industry, and then if they're not in a big show like a Broadway thing, it's very hard to live only working in theater. They
yeah,
usually working. I mean, probably in New York, same, but
yeah,
yes. But at the same time, in Japan, there's a very traditional theater, like for example, like a kabuki or no
yeah.
or that kind of traditional stage still happening in Japan. So probably I haven't watched kabuki or no a lot, but probably they have a different system or different culture other
Yeah,
than other like contemporary theaters.
yeah. It's actually fun to actually, especially since I'm accustomed to the American style, theater. The more plays being more very drawn out, or that sort of thing. Whereas like, or plays that go on for like 3 hours, or just plays that just go on for like 45 minutes, that sort of thing. But musicals that are like 2 hours, or without intermission, and then there are intermission for a 3 hour musical, that sort of thing. But I would love to actually explore more about theater, especially overseas, especially, like you said before with German operas. Like, I feel like that would be, because I know German opera has a lot of, like, a lot of history in terms of just, like, just creating music all by itself, that sort of thing. And I know Japanese theater has a lot of history all by itself, especially learning about it in theater history. But yeah, I feel like once you start merging yourself, merging yourself into these different things, you become a lot more in tune. But it's like what we were saying before. It's like you kind of wish there was like a handbook that just tells you about American style theater. All right, this is why we need to learn about American style theater. British style theater. Okay, so Irish style theater, got German, Japanese, Russian, that sort of thing. So it's odd how since there, even though theater is a global thing, like it's a global like every continent, probably even someplace in Antarctica, they could have theater. It's like Antarctic theater is like, it might be Antarctica. Now I'm actually, it's interesting to know if there is Antarctica there, but but it's just by joking about that. It's like, is it Antarctica? Anyway, it's like, you know, anyway, but you know what I mean. You know what I mean? It's like all these other continents. You know, North America has its style theater. South America has their style theater. You know, so forth and so on. So, it, especially as a stage manager, you have to like really be engrossed. Well, not engrossed, but just like really enrich yourself into essentially. Okay, I have to really learn about this stuff, even though I'm kind of like used to the American style of theater, which is essentially called, you know, have this like cue be called, to have this sound cue be called, that sort of thing. Make sure, blah blah blah. Make sure the ASM for making sure that people are not talking backstage, because I can hear them backstage. You know, but compare that to other theaters, you know, overseas. It's odd how essentially, even though theater is like a universal format. There's so many other different styles, and it's so fun to actually learn those styles. But again, you kind of wish there was like a handbook that actually tells you like all these different styles, like in a more very like I want to say point by point, where it's just like, oh, it's like almost a textbook, but there is no like stage managing textbook that I know of. I mean, people will be like, oh, you know, get this textbook, this has stage managing thing, but there's no like stage managing textbook that I know of, or stage. I mean, there are probably stage managing books, but there is no like definitive one that I know. So yeah, it's a bit of a learning curve, but I do hope that like one day, like all these places around the world have like a great way of actually encompassing, you know, in terms of like stage management.
Right. I I really need that book if I could have it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, honestly, it's really hard to dealing with the different country theater system, especially like a language is different, but also system is different, and also it's not only just a stage manager, but also performers are for example, the last year, all opera singers came from different countries. So they
Yeah.
know different system of like a performing arts system. So that was very hard. So if, I mean, I don't hope that someone could get together like a same system
Yeah.
all over the world. But if I could have something to learn the difference between each country's stage management system, that would be really helpful to
Yeah,
work for different country.
be very easy, but at the same time, they're like, okay, it's like, oh, okay, I'm doing a show in, you know, in Australia, and I know Australia theater is like, I think maybe similar to our own theater, but it'd be like weird. But it was like, okay, how do Australian theater, you know, like do their stuff? It's like, so it's, and again, I do feel like that this is why stage managers are like the unsung heroes of a production, because they are essentially making sure, you know, not only is the show running, but also the production itself, you know, backstage, that sort of thing. Everything hasn't really be, you know, everything's not falling into place, you know, that sort of thing. Especially in terms of stagehands, because stagehands would be like, and I know with some experience with stagehands, would be just sitting around just waiting for our cues to go out and, you know,
Yeah.
go, yeah, it's like, yeah.
Yeah, I think that from my experience, when I learned stage management in the college for the first time, the professor told me that there are four important things for
Ooh,
being a stage manager. So the first one is leadership, and the second one is organizing skill, and the third one is communication, and the fourth one is hospitality. I
yeah,
think that those four things, even though if you work for the different countries, I think those four things don't change at all
yeah,
as a stage manager. So I think those four things, if you could do those four things very well, I think even though you don't know that like the difference between different system of the country, I think it very helped to work for the different country as a stage
yeah.
manager, I think.
Yes, it's very universal. Like for like those four things, it's like a universal advice where it's like, okay, you need leadership, you need communication, you need hospitality. and you just need great organizational skills. And I feel like organizational skills is what like really drives a stage manager to do that best, because you know it's like what you said before. You know, even though the even though theater is becoming a lot more technical now, especially with the use of laptops, that sort of thing, there are still production people who I know who still use like actual physical copies. But you just said before, you still use a physical copy. People might be used to just using a tablet and just have like and go to the next page. Okay, I have this marked down yellow. It's like that sort of thing. But I know people who still have their scripts, and their scripts are like literally tabbed out, whereas it's like they have like yellow tabs, pink tabs, blue tabs, that sort of like different tabs. So yeah. Now that is an interesting question. Do you see more people now as a stage manager? Do you see people being used, like starting to be more use of like the tablet or the laptop that have the like cues, that sort of thing? Or do you? And since you naturally prefer the more physical type, do you see people still using the like in the next like say decade or so? Do you see like productions, especially on Broadway or something like that, to be more technical, whereas it's like, okay, we have the computer, we have a tablet, blah, 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 that sort of thing. Or do you still see productions being more physical? It's like, okay, here's a script. All right, here's some tabs. All right, pink tab here, pink tab there, that sort of thing. So in your experience, do you see it leaning towards the more technical thing where it's like, okay, a lot more productions are gearing towards like tablets and laptops where they can actually program cues more efficiently? Or do you see like some productions still holding back to tradition where it's like, okay, we prefer the physical thing, but even if we have your tablet or computer, it's still not might work because faulty Wi-Fi, that sort of thing, especially in a theater. It's like just getting your Wi-Fi in a theater is like a different story altogether.
I think recently I still see a lot of people using paper script rather than iPad or their laptop or like those electronic device. But at the same time, I see some stage manager have started to using iPad script rather than like for example, like to run the show. Probably they are using paper script for the rehearsal, but once they finish the rehearsal and they finish the technical rehearsal and it goes to the performance week, some stage manager and also I sometimes use iPad or for the running the show because it's very easy to maintain the queue. So there's recently there's a website that we can, for example, if you upload their script to the website, then you can put the queue for like organize the queue using the iPad or your laptop. So you don't need to write down everything by yourself. That's very easy. So
that is very easy compared to
and very clean on the script. So some people start using that kind of stuff already. And then a couple of days ago, I joined to the Broadway stage manager meeting. Some of them are actually using not the paper script, iPad script for the running the cues. So I think but at the same time, I think that if, as you say, that sometimes technical issue may happen, like so it's always good
best
to
have like the physical copy.
Physical copy. Yes, I think so.
And I do think that even though productions, especially Broadway, have been gearing towards a more technical side, where it's like, oh, we have a laptop, that sort of thing, an iPad. It's always best to have the actual physical copy of the around because laptops can die unexpectedly. Tablets can die unexpectedly. Both just signing into a Wi-Fi in a theater, it's a battle all by itself because theaters don't have even though they have free Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi only thing, just being in a certain space in a theater could be very, very you could be looking at your thing on Google Drive, and then you go and click on your script on Google Drive. The script's not loading up because you're not in the right position in the theater because the theater is like blocking out all these Wi-Fi signals, even though we're supposed to be having the Wi-Fi. But yeah, so having the physical copy is a great thing all by itself because hey, the computer's not working, the laptop died unexpectedly, or it suddenly went dead, suddenly went blank, even though it's on, it just went blank. Okay, crack out the the physical copy. Where are we? Page 82. Okay, go to 82. Okay, we still got the thing. It's like so yeah, it's always good to have the backup copy, the physical copy, just in case something happens.
I think so. Yeah.
All right. I think on that note, I think that's a good way to actually end this episode and end this season.
Okay.
Because I feel like you've talked a lot in terms of not only theater, but also just the stage managing thing too. Because as I said, stage managing is like an unsung thing, an unsung hero of just the technical side of theater, which is what I was trying to strive to do for this portion of the end of season 2, which is to focus more on the technical side of theater or just technical side of performing arts. I know you said you wanted to ask me some questions, so I feel like this being the season finale, do you want to ask me some questions about stage managing?
Not this. Do you want me to ask about the stage management thing? But if you, for example, you're mostly doing acting, right?
Yeah, I do mostly acting, somewhat of backstage stuff too, especially front of house, that sort of thing too. So yeah.
So as an actor, what kind of stage manager is like a good for you, okay, for like actors? What do you seek to a stage manager usually?
Oh, that's actually a good question. I tend to, in terms of the stage managers that I had in the past, the den mother, like the quote unquote den mother, where it's like, oh, they're like, or the den father, where it's like, oh, it's like what you said before. They have great hospitality. So it's like, not only are they doing great cues, but they have great rapport with the backstage, and then making sure the backstage feels like not like tired, even though the show is gonna be like, oh, the show is like 2.5 hours. They're keeping up on their toes, making sure everyone is not only they're doing their great stuff, making sure they're doing their stuff, but also keeping up their people's toes, talking to people, that sort of thing, making sure it's like, oh, you're tired, what's up, that sort of thing, This scene might be 10 minutes, but all the kids are talking about it. So it's like, so we got some time. It's like, what's up? It's like, why are you telling me? Like that sort of thing. So I like the stage managers who are very personal behind the scenes, who are able to actually say, hey, what's up? Well, let's go. Like, they're actually personable. They're not like, okay, yeah, I can't really talk right now. It's like, I gotta do my next cue here. That's what. So, but yeah. Especially with the people who I work with at BMC. Actually, yeah, at both the MCC and at Brooklyn College, I've always had like great personable stage managers. So yeah, as long as like they're, I don't want to joke. It's like as long as they have great customer service, so like that sort of thing. Where it's like their customer service record would be like so. But yeah, they have great hospitality, and they're always treating the cast pretty well. So yeah, in terms of that sort of thing, I would quote unquote say like the den mother or den father, where it's just like they're kind of like very personable with the cast, and making sure the cast is having fun. They're making sure the behind the scenes people, stagehands, costume crew, that sort of thing, they're not feeling left out. Because it might be a big cast, so they have to focus on that big cast already. The crew might be even bigger because the amount of people behind the scenes, that sort of thing. So yeah, that's how I usually gear towards, is that very personable, supportive, that sort of thing. But of course, that's the only like stage manager I've actually encountered. I haven't really encountered like the hardened talk to me while I'm doing my show thing. That's what I'm
Thank you. That's really good. Yeah, because sometimes people don't think that stage manager is very important
yeah.
job, but at the same time, it's very like a behind the scenes. So not someone don't pay attention to our like a stage management work. But thank you for
Oh, no problem. Do you have any other questions? Like, do you have any other questions for me, or is that just the one question you wanted to know? Like, what type of stage manager you want to work with?
Well, yeah, I can ask that kind of question, but I that's it.
Like the quote unquote dead mother or dead father, where it's like they're the quote unquote dead father or dead mother is like even though they're like the cool like type of stage manager behind the scenes, because one, you have to be, it's like what you said before, you have to have great hospitality, you have to have great communication. So if you're only focusing on the show, that's a problem, because it's like, oh, you're focusing on a show that's like maybe even 90 minutes long, or maybe even 45 minutes, that might be a problem. But because and the backstage might be like, say you only have like maybe say like 5 people backstage in terms of like crew, but you have like a 15 like cast members on stage, like that could be on stage like any given moment. I can understand, why you would be more inclined to focus on the show. But if you're like focusing on the show more so than focusing on behind the scenes, that sort of thing, especially with stage hands who really do a lot in terms of just being, not only are we running the shift along with the ASMs and making sure nothing's falling behind the scenes, that sort of thing, but we're also just sitting backstage, just like waiting for our cues to go back on stage and just make sure everything is all like really, really things, Even though we kind of like wish to be out on stage, at the same time, it's like it's weird because behind the scenes, it's like what you just said before. I mean, it's what we were just talking about. It's like it's stage managers and behind the scenes people really do run the show the most efficiently. Director might be the one who says, okay, might be the one who directs the people on stage, that sort of thing, and communicates with you, saying, hey, I need to have this, that, blah, that sort of thing. Just being more mindful about the people behind the scenes and having a stage manager who actually cares about the people behind the scenes and actually creates a nice little like levity that's like, oh man, I can't actually wait to be in this theater for like twice a day for today, because we gotta do like 2 shows, and I gotta be here at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I won't be leaving until like maybe 11 o'clock at night. But just this stage manager, they are making me actually feel like, hey, I actually can't wait to actually be in this theater with them, because they're actually making everything so enjoyable, even if yeah, it's like stage managers. It's like what you said before. Stage managers have to have those 4 levels of like things. They need to be a great leader. They need to have great organizing skills, communication, and hospitality. If they're only focusing on the organization skills and leadership, that's kind of hard. But if they're focusing on all those 4 areas, that's great too, because that's why the quote unquote den mother or den father are the ones that kind of like, because as long as you have like that personable person behind the scenes allowing you not only to relax and just take a little break. That's what it's like. It's like, even though you're gonna be out on stage like 5 seconds, just take a little, just sit down. That's what. Because you're like you gotta be like, yeah, Aunt, you just sit down. It's like that sort of thing. So yeah, I feel like I expect these questions before, but because of COVID, that sort of thing, it's kind of hard to ask. Like, what do you see doing? Like, what is your foreseeable future in terms of like performing arts? Are you doing stuff that's happening, regardless of, are you doing like, what are you doing regardless in the foreseeable future? Even though it's like hard, it's very hard to do like theater now because of what's happening. Because even though Phase 4 has been like slowly reopening in New York City, theaters are still not open yet. They probably won't be open until probably next year at the most.
Right.
So in terms of like any future projects, do you have any future projects that you want to say, hey, by the time this episode is out, I might have something, something that's going in the woodworks, or that sort of thing?
I think that that's a really good question, and probably there's no one knows that when we can start performing arts again, especially in New York City or in America.
Yeah.
Some other countries already have started gradually, but probably they've started outside of theater, like a park or something.
Yeah.
But I think if I say in America, I think it's very hard to start theater normally, like we did before. But at the same time, during this quarantine, I did one show with using Zoom.
Yeah.
And so probably a lot of people are thinking to have performing online at this time. And then at the time, that was really very actually interesting experience for me. That we had a rehearsal, of course, online via Zoom. And then during the performance, we did Zoom, but at the same time, we had live streaming on Facebook at the same time. So people could see our performance through Zoom or the Facebook streaming. But at the same time, we used some videos or some pictures and then slides and also sound through the Zoom using maybe share screen system.
Yeah.
So I had to call the queue to the sound crew or other technical crew. So what I did is for my 1 year, I had the earphone from my laptop listening to performance.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, my other ear has the different earphone from my phone, like my cell phone, and talking to like a sound crew or lighting, not the lighting, sound crew, and then other technical clues to calling the cues. So I actually called the cue through my phone during the performance.
That's amazing.
So that, and at the same time, I have to give them like a 5 minutes call or a standby call or a places call. So I give them that kind of call through the messengers to the actors and the directors or other people. So that is very interesting experience for me, performing on Zoom and at the same time calling you through the phone and then using messengers to communicate with people during the performance. So I think that kind of things still will happen in New York City or in America during this period, and then probably we can improve the system. So, but I hope that we can do like actual performance on stage, having an audience. That would be nice, because even though we could do very well for that performance, I think not for me actually, probably for actors and the audience, they cannot give their reaction to each other. So audience couldn't give them like a clapping or a reaction to the performance. But at the same time, the actors couldn't feel anything from their audience. So I think those kind of things, it's very hard to communicate with actors and the performers. As a stage manager, it's not like a big difference between calling to using a headphone or like using a phone. There wasn't much difference, but I think that things kind of have still we have to use to keep perform this time, I think.
I think for the most part, Zoom plays, they maybe be the norm now, but at the end of the year, if everything goes back to normal-ish, Zoom plays might be the norm now, but at the end of the year, if everything goes back to normal, they might be just like going away like everything else, and just Zoom probably be back to being like Zoom, like, okay, we have a meeting now, let's have a meeting, that sort of thing. So,
Right.
but yeah, do you
I
have any?
think that, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, and I just read the article that before this pandemic happened, I worked for Sleep No More Productions, and then
Oh, yeah.
I just read the article that that Sleep No More Productions is working with a company who made a Pokemon Go. So they're probably working like a VR theater, I think.
Ooh, interesting.
I think that's probably is next kind of theater thing.
Which is
I think.
VR, like immersive VR theater, which is amazing to know
Yeah.
because even though immersive theater, we could have had a great discussion. I feel like that's another discussion for another time, especially on a roundtable podcast, which is essentially immersive theater, which is essentially like similar to like say scare zone like Halloween, like haunted houses, because that's essentially immersive theater. That's what and yeah, I feel like immersive theater is a great discussion by itself, but adding VR to that, it feels like, oh, okay, that could be the next step for immersive theater all by itself. It's like, oh, you want to do something that you can't afford, ish, because it's like going to, like, I know Sleep No More is like, it probably costs us a lot to get tickets to that, and just, that sort of things. But if you could get, like, say, half of that off for ticket prices, and you just pay, say, $30 to like $40 or something like that, just to get like a VR experience of that. I do feel like that could actually be a nice step into the right direction where it's just like, oh, okay, VR theater. It might not be the same as just regular theater or just theater in general, but it is a nice step direction into saying, okay, this actually could be an interesting way of actually continuing on theater. Excuse me. Do you have any advice to those who are actually watching right now or listening? Just advice to those who actually are in the technical side of the theater, who are actually focusing on like stage management, that sort of thing.
You mean for people who want to be a stage manager?
Yeah.
I think I think there's not many college that has like a specific stage management major.
Yeah.
I mean, there are, but not many as like an acting or stage like a theater major. So I think it's very hard to focus on stage management during the college. But if like they're like a student, I think it's very important working with a lot of college production as a stage manager. But at the same time, especially in New York City, it's very hard to get a job if you send resume to the theater company and then to get a stage management job. For example, usually people find people from their network. So I think networking is very important during the college. So I highly recommend to do internship a lot during the college because I could work as a stage manager in New York City, even though I was international student. Because of that kind of like a networking and the internship very helped me to find a stage manager job in New York City and also the abroad too. So learning stage management skill is very important too, but at the same time, networking and connect other theater people. It's not just only like a stage manager, but also actors or directors or technical crews. People are always looking for a stage manager or some backstage crew. So I think it's very important to make networking and know the people in theater industry. Yes.
Especially those working backstage, because you never know who behind the scenes that could actually be the next helpful thing. And my last question really is a very straightforward thing. Do you have any social media that you want to plug, like Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, that sort of thing, a website?
I only have Instagram and Facebook, and I sometimes share my rehearsal or performance on my Instagram. So if people can follow my Instagram, you can see my stage management job, I think. Yeah.
Do you want to say what the Instagram is, or
Right.
like,
My
like
let
that
me
sounds
check.
like
My Instagram name is _Mariko. Or people can find me Mariko Takizawa. Yeah, that's my Instagram name.
okay. Mariko, it was a pleasure to have you on the season finale of this show, especially since this is the 20th episode deep into the show. And I feel like this episode was the right episode to end on things, especially since, not only do you have a great knowledge of what being a stage manager is, but also just knowledge of just saying, of just working other stuff, especially with different things altogether, that sort of thing. And thank you for taking the time out of your day, your busy day, hectic schedule, that sort of thing, to actually say, hey, I could easily talk about my stage managing stuff for about an hour or so. But yeah, yeah, thank you again for being on the show. Thank you again for being a season finale guest. My name, you know what, this is the season finale. I honestly don't care if I'm messing up or anything. My name, as always, is Bryan M. Davis. Take care of yourself, everybody.